What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, it is my Doom the Dark Ages review. So without further ado, let's dive in. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to Doom the Dark Ages. So the first thing I want to dive into and talk about is the gameplay. I feel like that is the most important part of a Doom game. Maybe the soundtrack, I could see that, and we'll talk about that a bit later in the video. But I want to start with the core of Doom, and that is the gameplay. We've heard all about the new direction in the marketing for this game. You had Doom 2016, and then Doom Eternal, and now in Doom the Dark Ages, it's Stand and Fight. This is a slower playing Doom game, but they wanted to take the franchise in a different direction while giving fans that same Doom goodness that we've expected from the whole trilogy. And I think they did a very good job with that. I think this is a different enough Doom game to freshen things up while also still keeping the formula that makes all of these recent Doom games and even all the older Doom games so good. It's still fast. It's not as fast as Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal, but it makes you kind of think differently about how you play Doom. You might think, okay, well, I played Eternal, I'm going to do the same thing that I did in Eternal here, but it's not going to work the same way because you now have the introduction of parrying and the shield and the saw and melee weapons. This takes a different approach to Doom, and I think for how I enjoyed it, how I played through the game, I liked the different approach for Doom the Dark Ages. So one of the first things you'll notice when you start playing Doom the Dark Ages is they've taken a lot of the movement mechanics away from you that you had in Doom Eternal. No longer is there a double jump or a dash or dodge. Those are not yours anymore. You don't have those at your disposal. But what is given to you instead of these new movement mechanics, they take those away and they give you new gameplay mechanics with the shield saw is what it's called. You have melee weapons. You now have the ability to parry. All of these that we've seen in a lot of recent games, parrying and dodging and all of this is becoming more common. Although there isn't a dodge in this game, there is parrying, and that is a big mechanic. Blocking as well is also a big mechanic in this game. So they've kind of taken what you see in your action games, your Souls-likes, and they've put that into Doom the Dark Ages. And once you get into the flow of combat, it takes a minute because it's different from Doom Eternal, Doom 2016. But once you get into the flow of combat, I think it feels so good to play because when you parry, you have to learn these different enemies' attacks, just like you would in an Elden Ring or a Bloodborne or any sort of your Souls-like action game. You have to learn the different patterns and movesets that all of these enemies have. So when you take on a Mancubus, you start learning, okay, where are their parryable attacks going to be at? And every enemy has a different set of those attacks. And I think it's really cool to, as the game goes along, you begin to learn these patterns and you see yourself improve in the game a whole lot more. But when these enemies attack, you'll see that it's almost like a bullet hell where there's a lot of different projectiles coming at you, and you'll have all these red projectiles. But when you see those green projectiles, those are the ones where you can pop your shield up and parry them and stun the enemy. And what's really cool is once you start getting into boss fights and fighting bigger enemies, you'll see all these parryable attacks, and you're almost just like dueling it out where you have to stand there, parry, the different patterns though. It's not just, these aren't like super easy patterns to learn. Maybe if you're like a hardcore like Elden Ring, Bloodborne, you played all those games, this might be super easy to you. And the parry window is pretty generous, but in the settings you can lessen that down to make the combat more difficult. You can also speed the combat up. There's a lot of accessibility features and options for you to kind of hem in your combat and your gameplay to what you want it to be, to almost make your perfect Doom experience. So when you're fighting these bigger enemies, they have all these crazy melee attacks with different patterns, and at first it's difficult to learn, but once you get it down, it's It's almost like you're fighting a boss fight, and it feels so good. It feels really good to parry with the shield, and I think it's a great mechanic. I know it's almost overused in a lot of games, but for the different approach that Doom is going for, I think it's done really well in Dark Ages. In addition to parrying, which is what you use your shield for, you can block projectiles. The shield is also a saw, which you can toss out like Captain America's shield and just decimate enemies. I mean, really, if you see a huge group of the smaller cannon fodder enemies, you just throw them through the enemies, and it's super satisfying to see the shield come back to you. You can even kind of angle your shield where when you throw it, if you move right where the shield's coming back to, you can get a lot more enemies that way. I think that's really cool. It's a simple mechanic, but in this game it feels great. But when you do it to bigger enemies, you see the shield go into the enemies and sit there and saw them, and they stun, and that's where you can get some attacks in. You can get your melee attacks in. The shield saw being introduced is a really cool mechanic. You also use it to open up areas when you're exploring, stuff like that. I think it's used in a very cool way. And you also now have melee attacks, which this system is a bit hit and miss just because of the animations and stuff like that. But at its core, it's very basic. You end up getting 3 melee weapons throughout the game, and they feel different. You can upgrade these melee weapons and stuff like that. They feel different. Kind of find one to fit your play style, but they are used mostly to just kind of stun the enemy. You do these melee combos, and they are mostly used to stun the enemy. I'm not entirely sure if I'm a big fan of the melee system, just because it's, you know, kind of basic. It doesn't really add anything to the game. When you hit an enemy, it always does this really weird knockback thing where it kind of slows down and knocks it back. I think it's because you're supposed to feel the weight, but when you're in melee combat, it honestly just kind of doesn't look all that great. The animations are not that great. It gets the job done. It can be satisfying at some points, but for the most part, the melee system, while cool in concept, was not really done all that well in practice, at least from what I was able to play and feel from the game. I just wasn't a huge fan of the melee system in Dark Ages. Moving over to one of the main attractions of Doom, and that is the weapons that you'll be wielding. And I honestly think that Doom the Dark Ages has the most fun and unique weapons in the entire series. Whenever you unlock these weapons and you find these weapons, they are really cool. You have your main staples like your combat shotgun, your super shotgun, which has, the super shotgun's really cool. It has a really cool reload animation where you almost like, it's like a revolver animation where you flip it. It's like a gunslinger type thing. That feels really cool. But then you also have new guns like the chain shot. That's a really cool weapon. You know, you have rocket launcher, grenade launcher. There are, I can't remember exactly how many weapons in this game. There's a lot of weapons. I feel like maybe 13, 14 around there. Maybe I'm off on that. But all the weapons, for the most part, feel good to use and are unique enough where you can pick out 1, 2, 3 weapons that you really like for a playthrough, but then you go back with another playthrough and you focus on another 3, 4 weapons. That's pretty cool. I like that. Some of the weapons, though, feel pretty similar because you have weapon classes, so your whole weapon wheel isn't enough to fit the amount of weapons you get, so they sort these guns into classes. So your combat shotgun and super shotgun are in the shotgun class, so you don't have both on your wheel at the same time, but you can switch on the go from the combat shotgun to the super shotgun. Same thing with the rocket launcher or grenade launcher. You can do the same thing there. You also have 2 new guns, the Ravager and the, I don't remember the other name of the gun, but the skull shooting weapons that we saw in the trailers. Those were really cool, and they look cool in practice, and they feel good, but they're almost the same gun, it feels like. There's not a whole lot of differentiation between the 2 guns. They kind of feel the same almost. One's just better at crowd control than the other one is. One's more focused in on one target. That's pretty much the difference. So although the weapons are really cool and unique in practice, and they for the most part feel good, some of the weapons just feel very samey, which I'm not a huge fan of. And also a big difference from Doom Eternal is the fact that in Doom Eternal, you ran out of ammo on your weapons very, very easily, so it made you switch through all your guns, you know, all the time. You were switching from your AR to your shotgun to your rocket launcher because you needed ammo, and sometimes you didn't have the chainsaw to get more ammo, so you were flipping through weapons all the time. But in this game, like I said earlier, it kind of feels like you can use just 2 or 3 guns and be fine with it. Now, I just said that I liked that, but at the same time, I kind of miss being able, or at least feeling like you have a whole arsenal at your disposal and you can use, and you feel like you have to use all of those weapons instead of not really having to. You can focus on 2 or 3 guns. That one's 50-50 for me. I like being able to get a play style down, get what weapons you like down, and only focus on upgrading those and using those. But then it just kind of feels like the other guns in the game are just thrown to the wayside when those guns are really cool, they're really fun to use and unique. I'm 50-50 on that part. I like it, I don't like it. It's different from Doom Eternal. I remember there was a lot of problems with the fact that you ran out of ammo so quick, and a lot of people didn't like that. So that maybe that's why they changed it up. So I'm 50-50 on that part. But the weapons, if we just focus on that, I think stylistically really cool, really unique, for the most part very fun to use. The last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to gameplay is the fact that, if you couldn't tell, there are no glory kills. It kind of looks like there are when you're watching gameplay, but they're not the same as they were back in 2016 and Eternal. Every time you see that flashing enemy, you don't get that really cool, gross and nasty animation that's just brutal, like you know Doomslayer to be. You get these really just feeling off. They feel super off melee animations, and they don't feel nearly as good. Sometimes it feels okay in combat. The purpose, at least what the developer said, was to make combat feel more fluid and flow a lot better. You're not stuck in these animations. But I went back and played Doom 2016 and a little bit of Eternal just to kind of get a feel for those games compared to Dark Ages, and I really wanted to see if the glory kills took that much away from the combat and the gameplay, and they really don't. They're very quick, fluid animations, but they add so much to the character of Doomslayer and also to the gameplay because it's just so brutal. It's a part of Doom, and the fact that that is now taken out of the game and replaced with these really not that great animations. They wanted to not have you see the same animation over and over again, but you actually do that more in this game than you would in 2016 Eternal. You see the kick a lot. You see the punch a lot. I get wanting to keep the combat moving, keep the gameplay moving, keep it fluid, and there was a way to do that, I think, but it was not this way. I don't think that glory kills were that problem. I don't think there was any problem with the glory kills at all. I don't see... I can see wanting to differentiate this game from the other games, and in a lot of ways they did that very successfully. In this way, I don't think that that was what they should have done, because glory kills are just such a big part of these Doom games, and the fact that they're gone and replaced with they're replaced with something that's not nearly as great as they were in 2016 and Eternal. That's a big misfire for me. They feel okay sometimes. It keeps the combat moving somewhat, but not enough to replace them from Eternal in 2016. So I think overall for the gameplay, you have really cool weapons. They feel good to use. It's really different in a very good way. But then you take into account that there are no glory kills into this game. There are no... The weapon swapping can be 50-50, and also animations aren't that great. You get these glory kills that reminisce the older games sometimes on the bigger enemies, and those feel really cool. So they're still in the game, they're just not nearly as prevalent. And I feel like if you're going to have them in the game somewhat, you might as well just have them in the game the whole way through. You still have those moments where you feel like Doomslayer and you're chopping through enemies. But taking the glory kills out, not the best move in my opinion for this game. I did briefly want to talk about, and almost forgot to talk about, the two new kind of gameplay styles in this game where they bring in mechs and the dragon. That was a big push in the marketing where they were going to have mech levels and dragon levels, and they have their own combat and gameplay styles with progression and stuff like that. And they're just kind of okay. They switch up the gameplay a little bit. They spice things up just a little bit, but overall, when you're in the mech, you're just pushing the mouse buttons. At least if you're on PC controller, you're probably pushing the triggers or whatever it is. You're just doing that the whole time. The dodge is kind of sad. It's cool at first, but then once you get further in the game, it does get a little tedious and repetitive. It's cool in concept, but I think in practice it could have been done a lot better. This feels very basic. Your dodge is just, I kind of dash out of the way. I mean, really nothing crazy going on with the mechs at all. Same thing with the dragon. I think it's a little cooler, but it's still very basic. You know, you fly around, you shoot enemies. The enemies that you fight while you're in the dragon have these attacks where it's a directional attack, so the direction that you're not getting attacked from, that's the way you can dodge, and then you have these powerful attacks that kill the enemy. Overall, the mechs and dragons, cool in concept, but if they were taken out of the game completely, I don't think they would be missed. I could be wrong about that, but just from me, just how I, played with the mech, played with the dragon, how I felt about it, they were cool at first, but then they just kind of got tedious. It was cool in the dragon and those levels, how you could, you'd be flying around at first and you're able to land at these different locations, some locations that you're not even supposed to go to, that they're just kind of hidden to the side as side content. That was pretty cool. So I think the dragons are a little bit cooler, at least those levels are, than the mech levels, but overall cool in concept, but in practice they're just kind of there. Now let's jump to and talk about the exploration and progression in Dark Ages. The levels in this game are a lot more open than they were in previous games, where in not all the levels, like I said before, you have your dragon levels and your mech levels. Those levels, except for the dragon levels, those are pretty open, but those levels for the most part are pretty linear. But your main levels where you're playing on foot as Doomguy can differ from your standard linear levels to you have a few levels that really open up. They give you multiple objectives to go and tackle in whatever order you want, and those levels, for me, I really loved exploring and finding all the secrets. Those were my favorite levels, especially near the end. I think the second or third to last level was probably my favorite in the game. The open levels are really fun, where you just kind of go on your own path, go attack these objectives in any order, but it really wants you to focus on exploring and finding all of these secrets. And progression is now done through gold instead of tokens that we had back in the 2016 Eternal. Now you have gold and rubies and wraith stones that you use. I'm not sure if I'm an entirely big fan of switching it up to gold. I mean, it does switch it up. It's different, I can say that. But I don't know, it just doesn't feel as satisfying as it was in the other games to upgrade your weapons. And because gold, sometimes, you find a chest hidden off to the side of the map. That's one of the secrets. Or you'll find a little stack of gold. But sometimes it's just on your main path, just kind of on the ground, just there for you to find. So it feels satisfying to find sometimes, but for the most part, the gold is just, I don't know, it's not a very fun progression system to me. The rubies and the wraith stones, those have all, pretty cool puzzles alongside them to unlock those, and those are the currencies that you use to unlock the higher up levels of progression and upgrades for your weapons and your shield and stuff like that. And once you unlock all the weapon upgrades or shield upgrade, I guess it's just the weapon upgrades, you get mastery challenges, which you can accomplish and finish to get a cool skin, some more gold. There's also level challenges like we saw back in the other games that give you gold rewards as well. I don't know, it doesn't feel all that satisfying progression wise. But I will say that the upgrades that you do get for your weapons are really cool, and they can change up the gun that you use in a very big way. Like the Ravager that you get later on in the game, I upgraded that all the way, and it turns into, once you get the charge up enough on it, you move around so much faster, and you have this big movement speed buff, which that was fun to mess with. Also messed around with the grenade launcher and upgrading that, and once you have that fully upgraded, every 2 or 3 direct hits with the grenade launcher spawns cluster grenades. That was really cool. I didn't obviously get to upgrade all the weapons to their full potential, but I think that's the fun part about it, is going through a playthrough, upgrading a few weapons, maybe upgrading all the weapons if that's possible, and getting to mess around with what they can be at their full potential, or going back in a second playthrough and doing the same thing with different guns. I think the upgrades themselves are really cool, especially the shields. You have shield runes, which when you parry, they do different attacks, like you have birds and eagles that attack, or you have lightning attacks. Same thing with the melees. The combos grow bigger. I think the upgrades themselves are really cool, but the way that you upgrade, I think, could be done a little bit better. It's fine, it's serviceable, but it's not as satisfying as it used to be in 2016 and Eternal. You still do have your secrets and collectibles to find. There is, for the most part, a lot of secrets per level. They are satisfying to find. I think when you are looking around, you clear a room and you don't want to move to the next room because you want to see if there's anything you miss. It's not hard to find these secrets for the most part. Sometimes you kind of see them in plain sight and you're like, okay, so I see it. There has to be a way to get to it somewhere around here. And for the most part, those were pretty easy to find. You see a little blue symbol on the wall, which you can punch your shield through. Sometimes the green symbol. You see the little statue that's up on the ceiling sometimes that's kind of dropping acid on the ground. You can throw your shield at that and platform up there. There is no platforming in this game like there was in Eternal, which I'm pretty thankful for, because the platforming in Eternal was probably the worst part about that game, so taking that out was a good move, I think. So finding these secrets, they're basic. There's nothing crazy about them. There's some puzzles that are, okay, that was pretty cool, but it's still satisfying to find, just like it was back in the original Doom. These secrets are really cool to find. You don't have any secret levels. That would have been cool to bring back from like a 2016. Nothing like that. And the rewards, they're okay. I mean, you have your collectibles and with cool animations and stuff like that. The weapon skins, they're cool enough, but the rewards honestly just aren't that great. Besides the collectibles, those are cool to find, but everything else, like the skins, you got your codex pages, which are always cool to read up on if you want to get more about the lore. Collectibles and secrets, they're satisfying to find still, like they are in every other game, but they're pretty basic. They get the job done. They're there, and I think they help more than they hurt. If we didn't have any secrets, obviously that would be a bad thing. They get the job done. I think they're pretty solid. Let's talk soundtrack. This is the most important part of the game, aside from the gameplay. You take gameplay and soundtrack. Those are the two most important parts of a Doom game, and this is the part of the game that's going to be under the most heat and the most scrutiny from the community, because you don't have Mick Gordon anymore. He was the composer for 2016 Eternal, and he did a killer job. Those are two of the most metal soundtracks, not just in gaming, but just in general. You take that soundtrack, and there's really not anything like it. What he was able to do with the different sounds and instruments and just objects that he used for those soundtracks, there's nothing like it. And now that he's not a part of Dark Ages, whoever was going to do the soundtrack was going to be under a lot of heat right away. That's a lot of pressure to live up to those soundtracks. And just at a base, it's not as good as those soundtracks, but it's still a really good soundtrack. I mean, it's hard to live up to those. It was going to be pretty much impossible to do that. But if you take that out of it, if you don't look at those soundtracks and you just look at the soundtrack by itself in a vacuum, it is still a fantastic soundtrack. It's still that metal soundtrack that you expect from a Doom game. It just doesn't hit like it did in 2016 Eternal. But it wasn't going to. Like I said, it's hard to live up to that pressure and that promise. So they just did their thing. They made a great soundtrack, and it fits the game very well. There have been a lot of issues I've heard with the kind of mixing and how it's really kind of hard to hear. I was having issues hearing the music kind of pop out through the gameplay earlier in the game. Later on in the game, it really wasn't a problem. I'm not sure what happened there. If you go into the options as soon as you get in the game, for some reason, the music is set to like 70 or 80%. So I'll just do you a favor and let you know that that's what it's set at. You should go turn it up to 100, because why wouldn't you? The soundtrack, it gets the job done. It's still a really good soundtrack. If you compare it to Mick Gordon's other soundtracks that he did for the other Doom games, it's not going to live up to those. But if you take those away from it, put this soundtrack in a vacuum, it's still a fantastic soundtrack that I think suits this game really well. There was a lot of moments where I was still headbanging, where I was still jamming out, listening to this soundtrack while playing the game. There's a couple of tracks that I would even pick out and, go to Spotify or YouTube to find and listen to on their own, because they are that good. So the soundtrack, just to kind of sum it up, not as good as Mick Gordon's soundtracks, but those are like 10 out of 10 soundtracks, 11 out of 10 soundtracks. This is a solid 8 out of 10 soundtrack. I can see you getting to it close to a 9. It just depends on what you expect from a Doom soundtrack. I think this is still a very good soundtrack, and there's a lot of good moments in the soundtrack. I want to briefly touch on the visuals and the art direction in this game, because first of all, beautiful game. Visuals are fantastic. You have all of these different environments. I think that the art direction in this game is the best out of the new trilogy compared to Doom Eternal in 2016, where you see a lot of your orange and gray type of environments. This game opens that up in a very, very good way, where it brings a lot of different colors into the mix, and you see a lot of different environments in this game, a lot more than you would in Eternal in 2016. I think the art direction was fantastic. Lots of cool environments to explore. You have like foresty areas. You still have your, when you're in hell, you still have that kind of feel to it, just like a 2016 Eternal, where it's a lot of orange and red and a lot of blood and gore and stuff like that. But then you have your really open maps where you're, like I said, in a forest or in all these different environments. I think the art direction, if you just go look at different screenshots of the game, just to kind of give you an idea of the variety of environments in this game. I can't think of all of them off the top of my head, so it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of variety to it, but I'm telling you, there's a lot of variety with the environments. I think the art direction, when you're walking around the castles and you can look on the wall to see all these details and the cool paintings of Doom Guy, stuff like that. The detail in the environments as well. Also, when you are, I'm not really sure if this would be art direction or visuals, but when you're walking around as Doom Guy and you can just kind of run through different objects like tables and stuff that you would see in the courtyard of a castle. You just kind of run through those and they fall apart and they go all over the place. Little details like that really kind of immerse you in the shoes of Doom Guy and make you feel like you're this big weighty beast, a machine that's just able to run through anything. I think the art direction and visuals do a really cool job of going alongside the gameplay. Very, very good art direction. Last, let's talk story. This is the part of the game where a lot of people, including myself, were not really expecting a whole lot. With these most recent Doom games, the story has been the weakest part of these games. They've never really been able to deliver on a story in these Doom games. They're just kind of all over the place. Forgettable characters, forgettable plot. You know, the setting is really what carries this game, but a story has not been able to go along with it. And in this game, it's a lot of the same. The story is really not all that great at all. There are cool moments in this game where, from a concept standpoint, if you take away the context of the plot, there's a lot of these really cool moments that, I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything story-wise, so I'm not going to get into that, but just know that there's a lot of cool moments that if you take the story out of the picture and you just have these moments in a vacuum, they're fantastic. But if you then take the story, put it back in, it's like, well, what is really going on? The characters are forgettable. I could see where things were going, but then towards the end, I mean, there's a lot of these missions where you're just not really doing a whole lot of anything. There's not a lot of dialogue. The cutscenes and visuals look really cool. The characters, I guess I should have talked about this in the art style part of the video. Character designs, enemy designs, all fantastic. They look great. But then writing and dialogue and the story is not great at all. And that sucks because the art direction, although it pairs with the gameplay very well, the story it does not. You have all these cool environments and set pieces in different places that you're playing in, but when it comes to the story does not serve the art direction well at all. When you have all these cool environments that you can tell a really cool story in, it's just not done here. With a Doom game, it's hard to talk about the story because when you want to criticize it for being not that great, it's like, well, do you really come for a story in the Doom games? It would be really cool if it had a great story, but you're there for the gameplay and you're there for the soundtrack. So it's hard to figure out how much you should knock a Doom game on the fact that it doesn't really have that great of a story. Eternal didn't have that great of a story, but it's still held in regard as one of the best first-person shooters of all time, and for many, many good reasons, because that game is fantastic. So, although the story is not great in Doom the Dark Ages, I would not go in expecting a great story at all. But if you're coming to a Doom game for the story, you're going to be disappointed. But if you're most people, I feel like most people are coming to Doom for the soundtrack and the gameplay. Even though the soundtrack, like I said, isn't as good as the Mick Gordon soundtrack, it's still a very good soundtrack. The gameplay, if that's what you're coming for, it's still a great Doom game. It still is a great Doom game. Story, not that great. But the gameplay of Doom the Dark Ages, it's different enough. It's very good. Just don't come to Doom the Dark Ages expecting a story. So what is the verdict on Doom the Dark Ages? Just came out about a month ago. It is being sold for $70 and it is available on Xbox Game Pass. So I'll just say it, if you have Game Pass, that's how I played it. It is definitely worth playing, especially if you have played the other Doom games. It's worth playing this one, even though it is different. I think it feels different enough, but still feels like Doom, where it's worth giving it a try. But my approach to this is, I think that if you are new to Doom, if you've never played a Doom game before, and you're looking at Dark Ages and you're like, oh, that looks really cool, I would recommend going back and getting or playing 2016 and Eternal first. Not because the story, you know, there's a great story between all three games, but you can kind of see the progression of Doom through the three games, and also you can get a better deal because 2016 and Eternal are still fantastic games, and they are cheaper. Like, I think Doom 2016 is still $20. Eternal might be $50 or $60 still. So if you're new to Doom and you're looking to get into the franchise, start with 2016. But if you are a Doom expert, a Doom veteran, and you still are on the fence about getting this game, even though it's a $70 price tag, I would still get this game. It's hard because when you look at all of the whole game and the whole content, it is just campaign. And it's a pretty meaty campaign, but there's no multiplayer mode. Even though the multiplayer mode in Eternal, the battle mode, wasn't all that great, the 2016 multiplayer was okay to solid. It was still nice to have those options there. And even though they said that they were going to not include a multiplayer to be able to focus all their time on a campaign, I still wish there was some kind of other mode there, even if it's some kind of arcade mode or just some different way to play the campaign, or something like that, just an additional thing, because you can go to the menu, you can see your extras, but you only get to look through your collectibles, and you get your skins and the toys and the dragon and mech skins, which I never got any. Maybe that's a pre-order thing. So there's not a whole lot of content outside of the campaign. So $70 for Doom the Dark Ages, I would actually say maybe wait until this goes on a small sale. Maybe like a 10% off sale. Maybe down to $60. I could see it. But if you have Game Pass, I think it's definitely worth playing. That's $20 a month. But if you don't have Game Pass and you're looking at getting Doom the Dark Ages, I would maybe wait for a small sale. I'm not going to say maybe. I would wait for a small sale. $70 with the way that games are rising in price now. Games are going to $80. This one is $70, maybe $60, maybe in the $50 range. I'd be cool with getting this game. But for $70 full price, I feel like you're getting a better deal with a 2016 or an Eternal rather than a Dark Ages. But if you've already played those games and you're looking at this one, maybe a small $60, if it gets down to $60 in the $50 range, I would get Doom the Dark Ages. I still think it's a very good game. It's a very good Doom game. I might not enjoy it in some ways as much as the others, but in some ways I do enjoy it more than the other games. I think all three Doom games sit side by side in a very good way. Different enough from each other, but also still feeling the same in all the same ways. So, that will do it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more reviews and my first time finishing videos coming down the pipeline. I got a lot of things that I'm trying to finish up and work on in the near future. So, thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more, and I'll talk to you later.